Good afternoon and welcome. My name's Nick Rowan, and my intention was to present to you this afternoon on shared experiential learning within a time of isolation. Now, unfortunately, I have to start this presentation with an apology. I can't actually be here today. Unfortunately, earlier this week, my young dog broke his leg and is currently in surgery. So I couldn't guarantee I could make this slot, and that is a really large disappointment to me because what I was hoping from this session was that I would get a chance to talk to my peers about some of the things me and my team have been developing and working on over this year, discussing with you what we think worked, and then hopefully having the opportunity to talk to you all, get some feedback, and actually find out what's worked for you. Look to perhaps work collaboratively if you see something of interest that we've done that perhaps you think could help your team, reaching out to me or members of my team and us getting involved in a collaborative project. And to this end, on the final slide, what I've done is I've put in my university email address. So if you do see anything of interest, if there is something in here that you are interested in and you would like to find out further information about, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Please do reach out, because the main reason I wanted to do this presentation was to share some of the things we've done, talk about what worked for us, and hopefully find out ways that we could improve and do things better on my core programs. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy this presentation, and I hope to hear from some of you so we can continue this discussion outside of what should have been the conference. So within this presentation on shared experiential learning in a time of isolation, I first off wanted to touch on why it's important to us, me, my team, our students. I then wanted to present to you some of the things that we've tried and then discuss with you, hopefully leading into a wider discussion, what worked, why we think it worked, and also what's worked for you. And unfortunately, that's the bit I'm going to have to miss today because I can't be here. So for me, the easiest and best place to get started is, what do I do? My name's Nick Rowan and I run two of the product design programs here at De Montfort. At De Montfort University, we have 3 product design programs. We're based in the VJ Patel building, and all 3 of our programs share the wonderful studio space you can see in front of you. Now, what that means for us is we have 3 programs with very distinct pathways. We have our standard BA product design program, which is the core of how to be a product designer. We have a specialist BA program that branches off that, which is called product and furniture design. And using the team's expertise over the last 25 years, we've got this wonderful pathway that branches off, allowing you to become a product and a furniture designer. And then we have what is probably my core pathway, which is the BSc product design program. That program is actually taught with a 50-50 split at levels 4 and 5 between our faculty, Art, Design and Humanities, and the Faculty of Computer Engineering and Media. What this means for all of our students is on these 3 programs, these students get taught and learn different core skills. So one of the things that we are aware of is that our students come in, they all share a design module every year, so they have that wonderful peer learning environment. They all share the CAD facilities, again, so completely program blind, they're timetabled within there, and they all share the workshops. But what has always been a large part of our program offering is the peer learning, is the opportunity to sit down with students on different programs with different core taught modules and to have that ancillary learning, have that peer learning, find something of interest that perhaps sits outside of the scope of your core program and enhances your core knowledge. So what you'll see rolling on the video in the bottom right are Week 1 project, which was our workshop induction project. It's where groups of students get together to build a Lego minifigure based on designs and sketches they do so they can meet their peers. So initially, Week 1, Term 1, we're bringing the students together across all our programs to learn together. And then on the left, you'll see a photo of some of our final year students. At the time, the student on the far left is Dylan. He's actually a master's student of ours who's coming back and helping Sam, Louis and James, all of which are third year BA students, with some electronics. Now, on the BA programme, electronics is never taught to our students, but because of their peer learning, because of that shared environment, because of some of the extra things we put on, they have the opportunity to learn about it, and they have the opportunity to approach staff who know about it and to approach their peers who know about it. And the reason I'm labouring this point and talking about it is this is a slide from our open day, and what is core to our beliefs and what was core to our programmes was our excellent workshops, our shared studio space, and our dedicated digital and design studios. And really, within the offering of DMU, right from before our students join us, they come into the VJ Patel building, they see the facilities, they see their dedicated studio and the workshops, and that is so core to our offering and our understanding of what our programmes were. As we moved into this time of isolation, we really started to have a crisis of faith of how we can deliver this, because we know as teachers, we know as educators, we can deliver our core content. We know through the blended learning and the facilities provided, we can deliver the experience that we need to deliver. But what we struggled with was delivering the experience we wanted to deliver. What we struggled with was all of this environment we built was all around allowing our students to have this creative space where they could learn and engage and talk to their peers and get this ancillary learning, pick up these extracurricular skills and really become a more rounded designer. And as the lockdowns rolled on and these lockdown periods went from 1 to 2 to 3, we started to notice that our students were becoming more insular, were focusing more on the work, and some of these extra ancillary activities were being lost. So since the second term of last academic year, we've been working on a number of different programmes to help our students engage with each other. And what I want to do for the rest of this presentation is talk about and present some of these. Now, we were reasonably lucky with the gaps between lockdowns and the start of term 1. And the first thing that I want to talk about with peer learning for our students is benchmarking. Design can be a collaborative process, and design can be a confusing process. And one of the most valuable things our students get to do is peer learn within tutorials and benchmark themselves against wider peers across the country through platforms like Instagram and through design competitions, and benchmark themselves against their peers through design tutorials. Now, this allows students to see if they've obviously missed a facet or a factor of a project, but this also allows students to see what level their peers are working at and gain an understanding of where their strengths lie and where they have skills that perhaps they could improve, and also who to ask. So one of the things that we did very early on this term was provide samples of work, both digitally and, as you can see in the photos, physically within the studio for students to peruse. We were very lucky in our timetabling that we were able to timetable in some time for students to access the studio and actually go in and look at samples of peer work. And the samples you see there are actually third year's work, and it's the complete third year. This was really important to us to allow our students to kind of benchmark what an undertaking their design project is. Because at level 6, it's a 60 credit module, because at level 6, it's a 32-week project, what was really, really important for us at the start is that they could benchmark where they needed to be. But obviously, talking about this restricted environment, this isn't something that we could do for all our students at all levels on all projects, particularly when you had, say, projects that had been changed beyond all recognition because of the new blended approach. So there were modules where the outcomes were so different, actually looking at previous peer work didn't help. And how we approached that was through a number of different means through our VLE. I think this is a great example from one of my colleagues, Simon Lambert. And what it is it's an example of creating 2 dedicated spaces within his module. And the first one is a project discussion. There are stats tracked on it. It's a Padlet discussion, and Padlet is a great tool that the institution can direct you to. Now, my understanding is you can get direction to it through Heather Conboy or your digital leads within your faculty, and that the institution doesn't have a full license. So we can sign up for up to 3 Padlet boards per academic staff member. Now, this has provided us with challenges having to move them around between the team, but this has also allowed us to do things like what Simon's done here, where he set up a project discussion and he set up a Padlet for work review. And the reason he's separated these 2 items out is so that the students know what space they're going into. So if the students want their work reviewed, if they've got some work that they'd like to put up and they'd like their peers to look at it, Simon set up a Padlet, and I've anonymised names where students can place their work, place their tutorials. They can very quickly take photos on their smartphones and drop it onto this online space. And each of these columns represents a student. And from there, they can benchmark against each other. They can see what other peers have done. They can understand where perhaps they are in a project, but also they can add comments and add helpful notes to each other. Now, this work is done in tutorials, and lots of our design projects have tutorials, but like all of you here, I'm sure you run into the challenges and the problems of students when they're online doing things like not turning on their camera, or you start looking at the limitations of the IT equipment our students have. So some of them don't have webcams. And one of the things we've tried to do is move design tutorials over onto Teams, because a Teams invite can be taken on most smartphones. And if you can take your Teams invite on most smartphones to your tutorial, all smartphones have built-in cameras, but also it allows the student to hold that camera, to move that camera around, to pass it over their work or pass it through their model, and really start to get a dynamic view. Now, this has been really handy for us, that they can capture this work, they can drop it into this studio wall space, and they can receive feedback from their peers. But what we talked about at the start of this presentation was how do we keep and maintain our community in a time of isolation? And what this really was this was a vehicle for presenting work and benchmarking. The second Padlet you saw from Simon was this Padlet, and it's like a discussion donuts. We have a joke within our team that if you make a mistake, you bring in some donuts. So a lot of the time, if one of us does something silly or asks something of a peer that they know is unreasonable, and we all know that our institution can ask us to do things that feel unreasonable, particularly at a time of lockdown, particularly at this time of stress when everything is far harder and scalable, but something has to get done. And our thing within our team is, if you're doing something like that, you bring in some donuts. So you bring in some donuts. I'm really sorry, I just need your help to get this done. So this was the discussion and donuts Padlet. And what it simply was it was an idea to get students an idea to give students space to drop on projects, to drop on work, to drop on ideas, to drop on things of interest. And that really has been one of the outlets where our first year students can discuss more random things. We've done this as an institutional forum, and we are aware that most of our year groups have WhatsApp and Facebook chats. But what was important to us as a programme is that we have a unmoderated space and we have a moderated space. So we understand that students will want and need a space to vent, a space to talk, a space to express views on lecturers that we don't want to know personally. But what we also want is a space where students can express and talk about the programme or challenges or wider issues, particularly in the time of a pandemic, and those answers can be viewed by multiple peers. Because I think for us, as a set of programmes, one of our greatest challenges was always, if I'm being honest, losing the ability to walk into a studio and address 30 to 60 people. The biggest challenge we've had is communication, and these Padlet discussion boards allow us to ping information to all of our students, allow us to get that information out there, and allow us to have it stored in a space that's easily accessible for them to talk and ask questions in. And that kind of is one of the cornerstones of what we've done. We've looked at creating these spaces where students can have their work peer reviewed, and creating these spaces within particularly the design modules where students can discuss other more broad topics, perhaps topics between the programmes that they don't have core learning to, and materials can be shared through. Now, you'll have noticed the second challenge that we talked about the studio and the peer learning, but also the workshops and our peer learning within the workshops and our access to our wonderful facilities and our even better technical staff. And one of the things we were so lucky that we managed to do at the start of lockdown was to send out a modelling kit to our students. Looks a little like what you'll see on screen and what it has, but it had a series of tutorials. And what this allowed us to do, and what this has continued to allow us to do, is to generate content, and through our new bureau service, get that content out to our students to allow them to develop some of the formative skills of model making. So some of the very primary skills of understanding form. And the reason we've done this is that our programme is artifact focused, and we're all about the artifact, but model making to us most of the time isn't about the outcome. De Montfort is a widening participation institution. We recruit a broad range of students, and actually one of the key challenges for us is getting students to understand 3D form or complex 3D forms. And for a large amount of our learners, they do that kinesthetically through touching and through modelling. And the skills that they pick up through these prescribed modelling challenges, they can then take into the 3D environment with computer-aided design or CAD. And this can really allow them to actually develop and create their ideas and push them further. So it was key to us that we didn't lose those core skills in this time of isolation. Most of the models have been shared through Padlets if the students wanted to, and then the final submissions have come in, and they've been quite good from term one. And at the moment, we're looking at how we can develop this further for term two, to get students to understand the basics of form and to get them to understand the basics of surface interaction, how two faces of a product come together. So when they want to express that within a CAD environment, they can. Another project that we spearheaded, because really we can provide that basic service externally to our students by post-sale items, but we can't provide the more advanced service environment, we can't provide the more advanced knowledge to them, was over the summer I worked with Gavin and his team regarding creating 3D workshop tours. So what you're seeing is a still image of a 360-degree workshop tour of our digital fabrication studio. And what we've been working hard to do with Gavin and his team is get these tours to allow students to walk through a workshop. All the icons you can see on screen allow the students to click on and find easy to access guides. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is this is really important to us, because our students, particularly at level 4, don't know what they don't know. So it's great that we say we can send out basic modelling to them, and it's really exciting that we can get items in the post and get videos to them for them to work through projects. And it's absolutely wonderful that our faculty is now trying to provide a bureau service to us, so students can order and get items to help them produce the models they want for their degree. But the challenge with that is you don't know what you don't know. So these 360 workshop tours allow for you to take this view on a phone and move your phone around in 3D space as if you were stood in the room, you were stood in the environment and you were looking at things. As you click on the machines, as you click on the icons, you will either be taken to videos or documents explaining what they are. And this has allowed some of our students to interact with the workshop space to understand what they could do. And this has tried to keep our attachment and tie to the building. So hopefully when we return, if we return this year, they'll have an opportunity to go downstairs. Now, this project is being taken further by Gavin's team, and hopefully we're going to look towards doing some of our inductions through it in future, so that you can be inducted, so you can understand what you're doing and build some of these efficiencies back into the programme. So this is one of the things that we've brought on this year that actually is going to enhance our programmes further, hopefully next year. And in that, one of the things you will have heard is videos. And what a lot of the team have been doing is developing extra content. Now, I loaded up this page, which is one of our YouTube pages with lots of builds of different projects. And you'll kind of see in the bottom centre, we've got a film rig video. And this was how I personally set up the film rig at home that I do a lot of my rigs on. Well, not my videos on, sorry. And one of the challenges we've had is that challenge of getting interaction through a screen. We're an artifact-based course, I said it before, and what we want to do is we want to touch, feel, hold, manipulate items in our hand. And guides like that to make a film rig, projects like in term 1 in Simon's module where the students make an overhead camera using their phone, allow them to sign into classes through their phone using Teams, allow them then to put the phone in this rig, which was actually part of the marked content, and manipulate their model under it so that we can interact with it in a way that helps us understand their design intent and helps us give them that informed knowledge, but also helps their peers be able to talk to them. Now, the final thing I wanted to touch on was this year we were lucky enough to have a front runner in place in advance for it. We'd managed to interview last year and we've got a great front runner in place. And one of the final things I'd want to talk about is we're just starting a project club, which is called Work in Progress Wednesdays. And what that is that is a space that we've got on Wednesday mornings that allows students or staff to talk a lot about the projects that they do personally, that they're doing on top of or outside of the course, to try and bring back in that peer knowledge, that peer learning that, again, we've been striving for in this time of isolation. So this could be this robotic arm that we're making from Tinkercad as a kit as the first tutorial, or for me, this is actually a forum that I can talk about the guitars and amps that I like to make, and that's my hobby. For Simon, who's the staff member I mentioned before, this is probably going to be a forum which he can talk about composites in, and composites are really interesting for the students' design for manufacture model or for their final models that they want to take to the showcase in London. And this will give them a chance to talk to and explain and talk to and ask questions of Simon and have that knowledge explained to them, and they'll be able to see it. So this really is another way that we're looking at trying to recreate that physical environment digitally. And what I hope you see from all of these is a lot of the approaches we've had is we've kind of had a two-pronged approach where we've had a static and an interactive approach to these mediums. And again, part of that has come from our diverse profile of students and the diverse ways in which our students like to learn. So hopefully with each of these, you're starting to see that we've got an interactive portal and we've got a static board where you can kind of drop and leave. And from that, I think, or I hope, if you're still here, and I thank you if you are, that your question is, so what worked? Which one of these should I do? If I was going away and I wanted to encourage peer learning within my cohort, what worked for you? And I think the impetus for presenting this for me, and the impetus for me wishing that I could have been in that digital space with you, in that room with you, is the honest answer was everything for some and nothing for all. And what I mean by that is we have had good, and by good I would define good as 1/3 to 2/3 of cohort interaction across all levels with most of these projects presented. But we haven't had complete access for all. And what we found is different students have engaged in different ways with the medium we've presented. So if I go back to our first point and I talk about peer learning for benchmarking, for understanding what's expected of a project and where you are within that project, we had a very defined split between students who liked to engage with a Padlet wall, which you'll see on the right hand side. Example of two students, one who's happy to drop up work, one who didn't want to have their work shown. And then the different environment for students who wanted to come in and physically thumb through, physically want to touch the artifacts, physically flick through them, or have that digital copy online that they could peruse at their will. And I think the one for that, really, our challenge around that was people who wanted to do their benchmarking in isolation versus people who wanted to share and get that peer benchmarking. And that has been the challenge for us with using these digital tools for peer benchmarking. So if we wanted to get that peer learning, we can get that across quite easily. But the engagement in peer benchmarking, where they share work and open themselves up to criticism, we've seen a drop off over the term in the wider forums as students have become more insular and concerned. So concerned that what they're doing isn't good enough. So that was one reflection we've had with regard to creating this culture of sharing and showing your work, and one of the challenges we've had around that. One of the other ones I'd talk about differently to that, or weirdly to that, would be creating a community for extra learning. And what I'd say on that is the donut community we had challenging. I think if you want to have a social community, our students have done it far, far better without us, and our staff have done a really great job of actually stepping back from it, being away from it, and keeping that professional relationship. So particularly at levels 5 and 6, that social environment for that peer learning, that extra discussion, that extracurricular discussion has thankfully thrived without us. At level 4, for our first years who never really got the chance to meet each other properly, what we've done is we've had some level 5 reps come down and help manage the chat, and we've encouraged them through the student rep meetings to do this. But the social interaction side of it has been better external to the things we've put in as opposed to through the channels we've put in. Where we have had a great amount of success is actually through video projects and discussing with students what we do and why. So what's worked really well for our students are really short things like an introduction video of what's expected for a week, and that can be less than a minute. What's worked really well is this is what the BSCs are learning within electronics, and here are some electronics tutorials that the students are finding and accessing and enjoying. And I was lucky enough to be involved in a CAI sabbatical this last year. And what we did was we started moving all that content that we had from 3 programs over onto a shared Blackboard community. And we found some great engagement through that as well. So it doesn't have to be dynamic. You can take the content that you've already got and put it in a place, and you're getting that community where students can point to it. So as opposed to a student perhaps feeling that they'd have to show their colleagues all about mechanics and go, this is what you need to do to test your rig. What we're finding is because they know the content's there, they're going, okay, we did this in about week 3. So if you go to week 3's lecture, you'll find all the content you need to contextualize your question. So I'm sorry that that honestly didn't really collate to much, because the challenge that we've had is everything has worked to a degree, but nothing has worked perfectly. And the challenge that we've really had is that the different channels are working for different groups of students, and that's where I hope that this presentation would open up into a discussion, because some of our students, in trying to create this peer learning environment, want to engage more transactionally, whereas some of our students want to engage more collaboratively. And what you'll see in those last two different examples is that kind of transactional nature versus that dynamic community nature where you build into it. And that, to a certain degree, is present within the physical studio when it exists anyway. The nicest thing we've managed to do with things like these additional videos and these additional walls is have students create content that others can learn from. And that's where the work in progress Wednesdays become really useful. And that's where having things like the discussion boards, where students in their own words can contextualize complex theories or complex principles of electronics or mechanics to their peers and go, when I struggled with this, this is how I learned to understand it. And those environments have been really great online. But what I was really hoping to do was discuss with you what kind of things you've done, because in this, what we've touched on doing is creating social spaces and creating display spaces, providing materials to students and allowing them the opportunity to share their own materials to be reviewed. We've talked about sharing projects at home that are part of the curriculum and sharing projects at home that are part of our personal lives that show our interest and passion for this. And what I'd be really interested to know is, has anything different worked for you, or is there something obvious that we're missing as a team? Because one of the hardest things to do at a time like this is to reach out to a knowledgeable crowd, to a knowledgeable group of people like yourselves who are all incredibly busy like my team are, and go, this is honestly what we've tried. We've had some success with most of it, and the biggest challenge we've had is that all of it creates extra work. What has worked for you? Is there anything that you would like to try? And that can be anything up to the 360 projects that we've done of rebuilding the environments digitally and allowing the students to walk through them. I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts on that. So I'd like to say is thank you so much for your attention if you've watched this. I'm so sorry I can't be there, but I couldn't guarantee that I would actually be able to be in this room and be able to talk to you. If I can, I hope to drop by, but it's likely I will be collecting my dog from surgery. If you have any questions, or if there's anything you'd like to reach out about, if you'd like to know more maybe about the 360 projects we're doing or the video tutorials we're doing, how to use a Padlet or anything like that, please do reach out to me. I'm happy to share any information we have. And if you do have anything that you think could broaden our offering to our students or help us to create that community even better, please do let me know. I'd be incredibly interested in hearing your thoughts. So thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference.